So this is a head base provided by CopperSprite for testing, for us to test the patterning software. So we're going to do some quick demonstration on how it works. So first thing I'm going to do is turn on the wireframe. So this allows us to see the density of this mesh. It's a pretty dense mesh. Um, I believe this mesh was made in Nomad Sculpt, and this looks like it was voxelized. So it's a pretty dense mesh, and because of that, I've spent a lot of time trying to make sure the software works well with a mesh this dense. Now let's go ahead and add a snap line. So the snap line allows us to use the symmetry of the model to start patterning. So let's start patterning some stuff here. So I'm hitting Control Z or undo when I create a line I don't like. And I'm just kind of making up a pattern. I don't have something specific in mind. So I spent a lot of the weekend working on improving the seam drawing to work well with this model. I really optimized the seam drawing a lot because it was pretty slow beforehand. So now that I want to mirror that seam so I can fill it in, I'm going to tell it to mirror about the center snap line. And let's go ahead and cut that and see what that looks like. So the pattern cutting engine has not been optimized yet, so it still takes a little bit. The long range, hopefully before release, the plan is to make the pattern cutting engine something that you can interrupt because sometimes you click on like some part of the model you didn't want to pattern, and then it goes off into La La Land for 5 minutes trying to flatten the whole thing. Okay, so with this model, we can see we have a bunch of tension here. So let's try to relieve that. Let's go add a layout so we can see what this looks like. The layout view is where you manage the flat patterns. So you can set up things like what paper size do you want to do for the layout and the margins and whatnot. So we just have this pattern yet, so we have nothing else with it. Nothing else for it to attach to. So I'm going to hit, actually I'm going to delete this. All right, so now let's see. On here, let's try using the center line to see if we can relieve the tension in this. So because of the way pattern drawing works on this, if you're over a center line or you want the line to really be straight, you need to make sure you're looking straight down on the model when you're drawing the line. Um, and that will ensure that you get the result you expect, because the software will try to draw a straight line even if you ask for something totally funky. Okay, so this did not do what we expected at all. Let's go look at our layout and see what happened. So what this is telling us is we couldn't possibly cut a piece of fabric like this because you can see that dart didn't do what we wanted. It's effectively telling us we have to try a different approach for this. So this might look like a bug, but it's not a bug. It's just telling us like this thing um, cannot be cut in a way that makes any sense. So now we can come back here and let's just delete that last line. And let's try a different approach here. So if I look at the curvature of the model, I can see, and this is how I think about patterning in general. I'm looking at the curvature of the model and I see I have a hump here and I have some other curves here. So kind of what I want to do is I want to start dividing up the curvature, and let's see what happens here. Let's mirror that. Now let's see if we can get that flattened. All right, what happens if I put a, so that looks a lot better. Let's go back to our layout. So we could definitely sew that. So now let's see, let me save this. The software is still very much pre-alpha. It crashes a lot. So I am frequently saving. And if you're wondering like, why does he pause for a few seconds here and there? It's because I'm saving so that I can just open it up again and continue. All right, so I can look at this and say, well, I know that I'm not likely to get the results if I try to cut that down the center. But what I can do is if you look here, it kind of has this little pronounced curve here, the mesh does. So if I go ahead and cut that, that probably will work. And also because that's a feature of the mesh, let's adjust there and try to get a better view on that. Because it's a feature of the mesh, maybe putting a seam there might actually help pronunciate uh, that little wrinkle in the muzzle there. Save that, and let's try pattern cutting this guy. So that looks pretty good. Let's go back to our layout here. So there's a lot of debug information on the layout view here. So I'm going to assemble these guys as if they were being sewn together so you can kind of see. So if I look at the labels here, there's a lot of work left to do in the labels. I have this fantasy of them automatically laying out correctly so the text is visible, but I'm not sure I'll be able to figure that out. It's a lot of math. Okay, so the way I've made the 2D patterning work is these little L's or T's tell you about the ends of other patterns. If it's got a T on it, it means two patterns join up. If it's got an L, it just means a single pattern. So that's telling us this L attaches to this L, attaches to that L, attaches to that L. And these are alignment hash marks here. There's still quite a few bugs in here when it comes to how the hash marks are laid out and the alignment. So I'm still working on that. It's going to take a while. Let's turn on the connection view. So that draws a line showing you which patterns connect to which. So let's keep cutting. Let's see if we get lucky here. And this, let me save it. And if this will pattern correctly, yes, that looks like it patterned correctly. So now you can kind of see how this goes together. And again, like I was saying earlier, these L's tell us what connects, and these little alignment marks tell us how it connects. So let's save and let's just keep going. Again, if I want this to be a straight line, I've got to come down here like this. And I'm going to follow the profile of the nose here a little bit. If you hold down uh, I've made it so that if you hold down the shift key, I'm going to undo that, you can manipulate the view or the cursor so that you can move things around while you're drawing. Because I've definitely worked with some software that does not allow you to move while you're drawing, and that just drives me nuts. I'm going to undo that. And, I kind of want a little bit more curvature there. I still, well, I guess I'm not getting it. I have a bug apparently in my snapping there. All right. Let's see what it takes to flatten this piece. So the flattening engine is very computationally intense. So it's kind of slow sometimes. So, okay, so if we step back and look at this piece, if you think about like if you were building this fursuit head, so first thing to think about is it's a plastic base. So it means you won't have much leeway for kind of squishing the base. Well, you don't have any leeway for squishing the base down. So that means you want to make sure you've reduced the tension on the fabric as much as possible. So my options here to cut this pattern and get it to work right are I could try dividing it into multiple segments, which is probably my guess what this is going to take. I could try splitting it along the curvature. I'm kind of skeptical that will work, but let's see what happens. So when I'm splitting, I'm generally looking for the most extreme curvature I can get and following that. And that's how I pattern my bases by hand too. Let's see here. Did we crash? Nope. Um, let's try patterning that and seeing how that works. And I'll babble in a moment here about why I wouldn't pattern that way. Did we pattern? There we go. Okay, so this relieved the tension on the front here. I would not do this if I wanted this to be a single color of fur. And the reason why is because now I'm going to have this really noticeable seam right in the front of the head here. And it's going to be like this thing that unless you're really retentive with it, you're going to see it when you walk up to and look at this head. So I probably would not pattern that way. I probably would do multiple segments to try to prevent a seam right along the front of the head. So let's try a multiple segments approach. Now, obviously, I'm not following some pre-made design, so I don't know what this would look like if you were to actually like try to follow colors. But even so, I would take the same approach if I was choosing colors. Like, let's say, for instance, I had multiple colors with this. I would be aligning my pieces to account for that. Okay, so this tells me that didn't quite relieve the tension. I think I don't have that line in the right place, so let's add a different line. And we'll move that one in a second here. One of the things I'm realizing is I really have to make it so that you can disable snapping depending on your context. So while you're drawing a line, okay, the good news is that got rid of that there, but didn't get rid of it got rid of the tension right on the front of the nose, but not right here. Let's see what we can do there. I'm betting, and I might do this if I were to pattern this in real life. I might try to bisect this pattern here. So let's do that. And this is definitely a case where I don't want, let's see what happens when we do this. I bet this will work. Whether or not you would want this, I don't know. So what I did is I turned off the snapping on vertices. So it's just going to snap to the line. It doesn't really care about vertices anymore. And let's see what that looks like. Okay, I would roll with that. Let's see about trying to reduce the tension here. That looks pretty fantastic. That looks pretty good too. All right, so now let's go try to lay out our 2D patterns and just so we get an idea of what this looks like from an assembly perspective. So 14 attaches to 13. 13 attaches to, uh, do we have a, that is 6, it's upside down. I guess I probably need to draw lines underneath things. So I have 14 here and I have 10 here. Let's see if I can make this look nice and pretty here. This is usually only something you could do in the very beginning of this. Um, as you get more into this, the connections between patterns become too much. All right, so 13 is telling me it also has a connection to 5. Where is the connection? It must be a corner connection here, or it must be a bug. Um, so again, like uh, these little L's here are meant to tell you how the patterns attach to each other, and um, their labels for the connections are um, the connection label D and then the pattern label. I'm still trying to figure out a good notation system for this because I want it to be something that you can easily and quickly transcribe to Fabric without having to write out like, a paragraph on each pattern. Because then I personally get too lazy and I sew an eyebrow to a lip or I sew an eyebrow to a foot or some other awful thing happens. Um, so I'm trying to prevent that from happening. Let's do a little bit more here. Let's see if we can pattern up in here. Save this because we're likely to crash. So I have my vertice snapping turned off. I'm going to turn that back on. So I'm going to adjust my view so I can go to view on this. So because of the little valley here, I probably would design my patterns to account for the valley because it's part of the curvature that's going to eventually, if I can't just lay fabric flat over that, I probably really need a seam in it. So I'm just going to go ahead and mark this all the way back to where it ends here, and just use that as a natural seam to get some good curvature in there. And let's go ahead and pattern up a little bit here. And I'm just making the patterns up. I have no specific thing in mind. So let's see. So I can kind of see this little bit of curvature in here, and I'm going to pattern along there. And let's pattern along in here, and let's see what happens when we cut these guys. All right, so save that for the inevitable crash. All right, that looks, I would just roll with that pattern. Let's go ahead and put it on our layout view where it goes. This will be fun. This will be the start of when you can no longer lay the patterns out in a way that makes sense. But you can kind of see the pieces and how they're associated. So I have this connection graph on, and you can turn it on to show all the connections or only the connections for the thing that you have highlighted. So it will just only show that. Or you can say, turn them all off. I don't want the clutter. Affectionately, I call that the rat's nest inside the code, because it becomes a rat's nest of lines very quickly once you get into a complex pattern. But I think it's useful in helping understand how things get assembled. All right, so now let's see what our options are. So because we have red areas here, this tells us there's distortion there. Let's see if we can cut that. Again, I'm looking, if you look at the curvature here, you can see that this is the most extreme curvature. So I'm probably gonna follow up in here. And let's see what happens when we cut that. All right, so that relieved that. I might roll with that if I was making that, but let's try an experiment and see what happens if we cut that into two. So the other thing, I'm really particular with creative software because I've used enough of it where there's particular pieces of creative software I really hate, the way they work. So I've made sure that escape works to cancel every tool. It seems like such an obvious thing, but I've used software where when you hit escape, like if I hit escape there, it just cancels the current operation. It seems like such an obvious thing, and it seems like good creative software follows that type of model. But I have some creative software that's part of my fursuit workflow that does not do that, and it drives me insane. Okay, I would probably roll with that. Maybe let's try one other approach. I don't think this is going to be any better, but we'll start over here since I was not able to relieve that tension, and then we'll follow up here. Wow, that I think that made things better. You might also want a little bit over here. So part of the problem is when you cut darts like this, you've got to think about the implications of actually sewing that. Okay, so that still left me with this one over here. Let's try to get rid of. Um, Unfortunately, there's a bug in the tree view where it doesn't always select the thing you wanted. Let's see if doing two like this helps. Nope, I think that was better before. I don't know what's going to happen when we hit redo. Let's find out. Yeah, it's just going to redo what I did. All right, I will at least extend this one out into here to try to get a little bit of the tension that's further up removed. That looks good. Now, if I was insane, I am not this insane. You could come off here and try to do something like this, which might further relieve the tension there. Yeah, but let's go look at that pattern. All right. So Because this dart is so small, it's telling us there's not a lot of value there. I don't think I would do this just because I wouldn't personally want to sow that, but that's what that's telling us. Here, it's kind of the same thing. The dart is really small. Sometimes, uh, let's do this. I guess I need a way to undo the last pattern. Um, so let's just delete that pattern. And let's delete that seam. The reason I didn't just hit undo there is because it's going to undo me organizing the patterns in the 2D layout view. When you build software like this, you learn really quickly about how important all the interactions are to making you efficient. So like, I really want this to be something that's super efficient, um, just so I can roll with it and not have to think hard about like you could, yes, you can use Blender and you can use UVs, and retopology and everything else to do this. I just want to make fursuits. I say that and I'm sitting here making software, but I want to make fursuits and not have to have my workflow disrupted. Um, I would roll with that pattern. Let's go see if we can pattern around the eye and see what happens. So like I wanted a highly optimized tool for patterning things because I personally don't like using, well, I can't use duct tape that much. My hands are kind of a wreck, so the act of tearing duct tape really makes it difficult for me to tear duct tape. I can do it for like maybe an hour or two, but it's the tearing motion. So then I resort to scissors, and it takes me a lot longer to use duct tape. So let's see what happens if we just cut this. I don't expect this to work. You can see the curvature here is going to probably prevent that, like this here, and then it looks like there's a little bit of curvature there. But let's see what happens. And we crashed. All right, let's just restart that. And yes, I use Linux to do all my development because it's way quicker than using Windows because it doesn't let me, Windows locks some of the files for development. And apparently I did not save some of our patterns. That's fine. We'll just um, roll with this. Oh, I loaded the wrong file. No wonder. Um, it's a little bit slow to load files right now. I still got a lot of work to do there. All right. All right. So now let's try patterning this guy and see if we don't crash again. Nope. Apparently we're not patterning that. I have to hunt down some bug there. Oh well.